What's up, everyone? Scott the TroutHammer here. Welcome to another Tackle Box edition for the Pecs and Pisces Fishing Channel. And today we're going to talk about one of the most useful, versatile, and effective rigs for fishing, the Carolina rig. Now, I imagine that most of my viewers are experienced fishermen and already know about the Carolina rig, so this is more for the people who haven't heard of the Carolina rig or have heard of it but really don't know when and where they should use it or even how to tie a Carolina rig. The Carolina rig is an extremely useful bottom rig. So this is the kind of rig you want to use if you know the fish are going to be deeper on the water column, even on the bottom, or suspended just a few inches from the top. And this can count for all species of fish. This can count for perch, this can count for trout, bass, crappie, you name it. One way the Carolina rig is also effective is because it's very stealthy. It's not something that draws a lot of attention to itself aside from just the bait or the lure you're using. So it's something that can sort of sneak up on a fish, or if you're using suspended bait like with a Carolina rig with power bait like I'm going to demonstrate, is something that trout, when they're going to be moving around near creek channels and also near like humps or structure on the bottom, they're going to see that bait floating suspended and they're going to see it as an easy meal and pick it up. So in order to tie a Carolina rig, the things you will need a sliding weight, and you could use either a egg weight or a bullet weight. Both have their uses, and I'll explain both of them. You'll need a small sliding bead, glass or plastic, either one works, a small swivel, and then leader with hook, bait, lure. That depends on the situation you're fishing in, but let's get into how to tie a Carolina rig. So you take your main line, and the first thing you put on is the weight. Slide it through the middle of the weight so it can freely move around. The next thing you put on is your bead. So same way with the sliding weight. Put it so your bead slides in there. The purpose for the bead is it will protect your swivel and your knot on the swivel from the metal weight slanting against it. And the next thing you take is your swivel. Any knot really works in this situation. You can I'll put a link to one of the videos I did on the channel recently about effective fishing knots, 5 fishing knots that every fisherman should know. Really, any knot works for the Carolina rig. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to tie a quick uni knot on here. And you clip off your tag end. And one of the nice things about the Carolina rig is it really doesn't matter how much tag end you leave on there. If anything, a little more will just protect the knot a little bit better. So that is how the Carolina rig will look from your main line. This end goes to your rod, and this end goes to your leader. And the benefit of the Carolina rig with the sliding weights is because if you are using something where the fish are going to be pretty gear shy, if they feel the weight, they're gonna get spooked and they're gonna run off. The benefit with the Carolina rig is your rigging and your leader actually slide back and forth through that weight, and the weight just sits on the bottom. So it's a stealthy approach. The fish doesn't feel the weight of the of your egg sinker until you actually start reeling in to set the hook on it. By then, it's probably too late. So you've probably seen in a lot of my trout videos me using the Carolina rig to catch trout from the bottom using power bait. So that's the first one I'm going to start with. With that, you need an octopus hook or mosquito hook. I prefer the octopus hook because it's easier to snell with the eye of the hook being pointed back toward the shank of the hook. And then power bait. So here's where it gets tricky. It helps to know the area you're fishing if there's going to be underwater vegetation, or if there's like knowing your structure, knowing the depth and the levels of your lake or the river you're fishing in, because that's going to determine how much leader you need. So just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to go with about 14 inches of leader. And then you're going to snell the end of your leader onto your hook. And again, this is where that video teaching 5 knots that every fisherman should know will come in handy, because I do teach a snell knot in that video. And then you're going to want to take the end of your leader and tie it to the other end of your swivel. And again, any knot works well in this situation. And by the time it's all said and done, this is what your Carolina rig is going to look like. So here's your main line that goes to your rod. There is your egg weight, your sinker, your bead, your swivel, your leader going to your hook. And for the example of trout fishing using floating bait, the power bait eggs, it helps also to know the I guess the best way I could describe it is the process they use to make your hook. I know trocar hooks are pretty dense, so it takes more of the power bait eggs to float the hook. But Gamakatsus are pretty thin. It only takes about 2. Also, the kind of line you use for your leader makes a difference. One of the things with the Carolina rig is your main line could be braid going to your rod, and then this could be a different style line. So this is just mono, floating line. So that'll help with this being a floating rig. Then you take a couple pieces of your power bait, put it on your hook, make sure your hook point is exposed, and when you cast out, your weight will sit on the bottom and your power bait will float up and suspend a foot or so off the bottom. And when the trout are roaming around looking for food, they see that as an easy meal. They pick up on the scent, they see the color, and they just go, oh, easy food, chomp. And where a lot of times they can feel the weight involved, so like if you're fishing from like a worm and bobber, and they feel, sometimes fish can feel the resistance from the bobber, and when they bite, they feel the resistance, they just let go because they know that's not actually food and they take off. This is a lot more stealthy approach because when they bite, they have the ability to pull your line through your egg sinker. They don't feel the weight, at least not as much, and by the time you go to set the hook, you got it. So this is a very effective rig for trout fishing, especially in lakes and ponds, because there's not a lot of current to move your bait around. But if you're fishing in a river or a creek, anywhere that has a current, look for the calmer spots, the eddies that are on the that are in little dead spots in the channel, to where there's not current actually pulling your bait away from your sinker, and it won't stay suspended, but it'll sort of sway on its own. That gives a little motion. That's just a little something extra to catch the attention of the fish. But you can even make a floating rig using earthworm or using like crappie niddles, one of my favorite Berkeley power bait baits you can find in stores. And if it doesn't float, they do make these, we call them cheater floats. They're these little foam sort of pills that look like an egg sinker. And what you do is you just you put it on your leader behind your hook, and you peg it like with a toothpick or using a bobber stopper, and this will actually create the flotation. And you can also use a different color than your bait to create contrast, and that'll be something else that'll get the fish's attention. But that's what you could use with if you're going to use a worm or something that doesn't float like the power bait does, to still give it some float. Or if you're fishing in a current, it's a way to give your actual power bait more float to stay suspended up to get the fish's attention. But and not just for trout, this is a great and effective rig for any sort of bottom fishing you're going to do. This is the same rig I use when I fish for catfish, when I fish for carp, because I want something to just sit on the bottom where the fish are going to be roaming around looking for food. So it really doesn't matter the type of hook you're using at that point. I mean, when I go fishing for catfish, I use circle hooks. Carps, I use a hair rig. But it's just something that sits on the bottom. The fish can pick up the food, move around, not feel the resistance of the weight, and then you feel you have something on the line, and then you go to set the hook on them. And the Carolina rig can also be effective for bass fishing, crappie fishing, any warm water species that's going to be suspended near the bottom or a few inches off from the bottom, using worms or any kind of bait that you want to, in a stealthy manner, bring across the fish's face to draw a reaction. So again, you can use like an egg sinker, or you could use a bullet style sinker if you're going to be using this for bass. I'm actually going to use the bullet sinker for the demonstration on this one. So again, same as before, you're going to put your main line through your weight, but this time you're going to put the sinker on with the point of the weight going down your main line toward your rod, and the blunt end of the weight going toward your leader. So you're going to go through the nose of the weight, just like that. Again, next thing to go on is your bead, and again, your swivel. So just like before, that's what it'll look like by the time you have it tied up on your main line. And then with your leader, if you're going to use a Carolina rig for bass fishing, I'm going to recommend anywhere between 6 inches to 12 inches of leader. You don't need a terribly long amount of leader, but you also want enough of a leader that's going to give it some distance from your weight. So I'll say middle of the road for this demonstration, I'm going to go with an 8-inch leader. So to demonstrate on this setup, I'm going to show you how to use a Carolina rig with a worm. So we're going to go with a 3/0 EWG hook. You could also use a worm hook if you like, but pick something that's going to give you a weedless presentation. So by the time you're done and rigged up, it's going to look like that. So here's the thing about worm selection. You want to pick something that has a little bit of buoyancy. I really like the Yamasenko worms, but these things are like, they're like half salt. If you ever like bitten into one to make a Ned rig or to shorten your worm up, you can taste the amount of salt they put in these things. So they sink really fast. They tend to sink faster and stay on the bottom more with the Carolina rig. So we're going to go with something a little more buoyant. Just for demonstration, I'm going to use that Lake Fork Tackle Big Fry worm. Right now, my new favorite worm. So you're going to rig your worm the same way you would Texas style. Slide the head of the worm onto that gap of the, onto where the gap of the hook comes down with the shank, and then rig it weedlessly on the actual hook point of the worm. So what you end up getting here with this rig when you bass fish the bottom, and that's why I recommend, and this is also why I recommended the bullet weight, is because you're going to be actually slow reeling this along the bottom, and with that bullet weight, with that tip, it tends to get snagged up less on the bottom. It tends not to just get stuck on its own. And this worm is going to drag on the bottom as well, and if it comes across a rock or anything, it's going to hop up and come back down. It's kind of going to move and sway on its own, come up and come down. And that's just a real natural and, again, stealthy presentation to give a bass, especially in the summer, finicky bass, when they're closer to the bottom or the water's cooler, and they're not really willing to chase down any food because of how hot the water is, and especially in the winter when the bass are going to be down where the water is warmer, and they're really not going to move at all. So you bring this across their face, it's a great way to draw bass into bite. And especially for bass, and especially for the summer, with this style, you can rig it up with a crawdad plastic. So again, rig this up Texas style, like you would a worm. And there you go. And an adjustment I would recommend making for this when you fish with a crawdad is to use a glass bead, because when the glass bumps against the metal of your weight and the metal of your swivel, it's going to make a sharper clicking noise, and that's actually the sound a crawdad makes when it's in the water, that sort of clicking, rattling noise. So that is going to audibly get the fish's attention, that clicking noise. They're going to know there's a crawdad nearby, and then they're going to see this scooting along the bottom, moving as a crawdad would, and they're going to go, hey, good, easy meal, I'm hungry. It's just the right size for me too. And then even with this setup, you can use this for trout fishing, steelhead fishing as well, because Berkley makes floating worms specifically for setups like this. And the size of worm you could use varies. They make the smaller floating worms. This is the 6-inch steelhead worm. Personally, I think these worms are too big. I don't, I don't know any steelhead close in my area that would eat something that big. They're all pretty small, but we'll just show you this for demonstration purposes. There you go, like that. And then when you're fishing a current, this worm is going to be a lot more buoyant than other worms, so it'll stay off the bottom a lot more, but a lot of times the fish you're fishing for in a current, if you're fishing for big steelhead, salmon, big trout like this, they're already hunkered down to the bottom anyway, kind of hiding out in patches where the current's a little bit calmer, or right behind rocks where the current slows down so they can rest. And you bring this across their face, bouncing up off the bottom like that, they're going to react right to that the same way a bass would. There you go, guys. There's the Carolina rig for you. Giving you two different presentations for different fishing styles, whether you're fishing for trout, whether you're fishing for bass, warm water, cold water, whatnot. It can be useful in so many different situations. It's so quick and easy to tie. You can use so many different styles of leaders, baits, hooks on the Carolina rig. It's just one of the most versatile things. It's the first rigging I really wanted to actually sit down and teach you guys. So if you guys had any questions, leave them in the comments below. If you guys had any observations, anything you wanted to add to this video, anything you guys adjust with your Carolina rigs that you want to share on the channel, please feel free to leave that in the comments below. If you're a new viewer, please consider subscribing, because I do educational videos like this pretty often, and also fishing videos pretty often, multiple times a week. If you could also, on your way out from this video, leave this video a like. Also share this video. Help spread the knowledge, help spread the fishing knowledge for the fishing world. Get out there, use the Carolina rig, hammer some fish, have fun doing it. Post any pictures you guys have on my Facebook page Texas Pisces Fishing with TroutHammer. And thanks for watching. And as always, tips up, tight lines, and have fun fishing.